The color page streak continues with One Punch Man Chapter 218, titled Just Getting Started. We have a relatively simple doodle of a chibi Saitama jumping out of a monitor. Saitama faced Sweet Mask in the center of Pesky Clown's remains. He admitted to being unsure about Sweet Mask back when they had tea together, but now, with a genuine smile, he's sure that Sweet Mask is a really cool guy. Sweet Mask didn't respond to that. Instead, he realized that this was it. This was the perfect opportunity for Saitama to become the most famous hero in the world. All he'd have to do is kill the monster in front of him. With his true face reflected in the murky red liquid, Sweet Mask decided to give his life for the sake of creating the ideal hero. Saitama couldn't believe he was still going on about all that ideal hero stuff. The guy sure was persistent. Sweet Mask had already accepted that there was no place left for a monster like him. Saitama did as instructed and took a good look at him. Sweet Mask begged him to end him. In response, Saitama made a fist and lifted it. He pressed it to his friend's heart. According to Saitama, Sweet Mask is just getting started. That things are bound to become more and more interesting. Sweet Mask couldn't believe his words. Blue Fire was keeping an eye on their whole interaction, so he noticed when the monster's demeanor changed. Sweet Mask called out to Saitama. Blue Fire shouted a warning that Cape Baldy needed to get away from the dangerous monster. Sweet Mask lunged and grabbed hold of Saitama. His bald head was in the palm of the former hero's hand. He was showing Saitama how much stronger his monster version is. Sweet Mask threatened to crush Saitama if he doesn't fight back. With that, he wouldn't have any other choice. Saitama pointed to the monster's hand and told him to hold on tight. He flexed his legs with a half squat, and they shot off like a rocket. Only a few people managed to keep their eyes open, and just like that, they were gone. Saitama wants Sweet Mask to become the ideal hero that he envisions himself. On his walk home, Genos could see the two of them overhead. Everyone was talking about the crazy incident in I-City. Namely, the fact that the beloved hero Sweet Mask is actually a monster. Experts would determine the truth based on all the evidence. From there, the Hero Association will determine an appropriate judgment. No one has been able to get in contact with Sweet Mask since the incident, and at this point, there's a lot of debate online as to whether or not Sweet Mask should be hunted down like any other monster. In the past, dangerous criminals have manipulated the masses as a means of expanding their influence, so many people would prefer he be straight up killed instead of captured. In time, the Hero Association confirmed that the footage of Sweet Mask becoming a monster was real. And despite being taken from the scene, Cape Baldy had safely returned, although he waved off any reporters who asked if he knows where Sweet Mask might be. Now, some of you may be wondering why they're not impressed by Saitama's survival against such a powerful monster. Well, Pesky Clown was estimated to be a disaster level tiger, so a monster who could beat him would probably be like disaster level demon or something. And since Saitama is an A-class hero like Sweet Mask, it's not too unbelievable to think that Cape Baldy could survive an encounter with him. This was a very bad situation for the Hero Association to be in. Some of their sponsors were even seeking compensation for damages. Sweet Mask has promoted tons of products over the years. I imagine that's how Jell-O must feel about Bill Cosby these days. The face of their advertising sector turned out to be a monster who was bound to ruin them financially. It was hard to imagine that no one was able to tell that he was a monster all along. One of the executives noted that Sweet Mask actually avoided Metal Knight's Monster Gate by entering from the roof with helicopters, which is a pretty big oversight for a super genius. The fact that Sweet Mask was able to compose himself so well inside of enemy territory was chilling to think about. That said, there were testimonials claiming that Sweet Mask actually helped to save lives at the amusement park. However, those accounts came from the former members of Norinki's private squad. The executives had a hard time taking them seriously after how useless they were against the Monster Association. Mr. McCoy's negative spin was a suspicion that the group just wants to place the association in their debt, that in exchange, they probably want to become heavily compensated heroes. So for now, Norinki's former squad is far outside of the Hero Association's good graces, but this gives the impression that we'll be seeing more from them in the future. These characters don't exist in the webcomic, so however they end up being used will be worth keeping an eye on. This Sweet Mask situation made the Hero Association question their ability to collect donations in the future. Because their financial roadmap relied so heavily on Sweet Mask, the Hero Association needs a new face as soon as possible. They already sent out tons of recruitment scouts, as we've seen, but have made very few noteworthy additions, as the responses were always the same, that they already have a contract with someone else. So in the midst of this crisis, they also have new competition thanks to Neo Heroes. They couldn't depend on Blast since his location is always a mystery. And that makes a bit more sense in the webcomic because we never actually see Blast there. Here, we've seen him many times and he just shows up. But yeah, Sweet Mask was such a major asset to the company that just the mention of his name was already becoming taboo. Sitch was contemplative. On his phone, he could see that Neo Heroes were using the situation to their advantage. They used the testimonials of some of the association's top heroes against them. According to Watchdog Man, if Sweet Mask was really a dangerous monster, he would have known by his smell. Now, the specification of dangerous gives the impression that Watchdog Man can make case-to-case distinctions about the nature of monsters like Saitama does. It can also imply that he knew that Sweet Mask was a monster, but didn't mind. Zombie Man wasn't willing to discuss an ongoing investigation. And technically, Zombie Man is a monster too. Now, this is a pretty strange inclusion. The last time we saw Zombie Man, he was with Dr. Genus trying to remove his limiter like Saitama. He even let Wild Emperor know that he'd be gone for a while. So how did TMZ get a hold of him? In the midst of a workout, Tank Top Master expressed his belief that the actions of Sweet Mask were full of tank topism. It's not clear what exactly that means, but since tank tops are his whole thing, we can assume that it's positive. While discussing the footage, a commentator criticized the responses for being so vague. And his accurately named colleague, Ignoramushi, had no idea what any of them were talking about. So from there, they positively shifted to the comments of heroes from Neo Heroes. Mr. A claimed that honesty and trustworthiness is a Neo Hero's motto, along with the emphasis on technology that allows them to realize such values, and that they hold their heroes to a higher standard. Mr. A urged society to move beyond Sweet Mask and the Hero Association, because by neglecting the quality of their heroes in favor of their looks, the association is a failure when it comes to heroics. They even had Metal Bat discredit the two. The delinquent thought about it. He cleared his throat just before the cameras started rolling. Metal Bat spoke directly to Sweet Mask. He admitted that he doesn't know if the guy is really a monster or not, but it's his belief that if the man isn't doing anything shady as a hero, then there is no need for him to run or hide. Pointing a finger, he demanded that Sweet Mask avoid sneaking around, that if he's a man, he'll come out with his head held high. And although the Hero Association might turn a blind eye, he can't fool the eyes of real heroes. The production staff was happy, and that was that. Sakingar was impressed by how well constructed the kid's words were. He really pushed it to the edge there. But honestly, Metal Bat didn't have to put on an act at all. He just shared his true feelings. With that, the broadcast was ready to end. Once the heroes were done, a guy named Mr. S.O. Peak expressed that was so peak, which feels very ironic. Sakingar always thought that Metal Bat and Sweet Mask didn't get along. After all, when the dust settled against the Dark Matter thieves, they were at each other's necks immediately. Metal Bat smiled while mentioning the fact that his little sister was really happy to get the guy's autograph. Now for this chapter, the manga and webcomic versions were pretty one-to-one. The only notable differences were the inclusion of Norinki's private squad and the Neo Heroes interview segment. Lately, these chapters have been really well done, but boy are they dragging their feet with the progression here. This chapter was based on 6.5 pages of the webcomic, so it looks like the days of crazy long chapters are behind us. I hope not, but let me know what you think in the comments. As always, I'm Sliceable Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.